Hello, and welcome back to Warning Signs. I am Kate Majot, a domestic violence survivor, therapist, and author. This podcast is my serial narration of my Warning Signs book series as I turn them each into audiobooks. Warning Signs is my memoir about domestic violence. It feels like a fun romance adventure story, but after each chapter, I explain the domestic violence that was occurring. According to the Human Rights Campaign, 35% of heterosexual women, 44% of lesbians, 61% of bisexual women, and 54% of transgender people have experienced domestic violence. The National Coalition for Domestic Violence reports the following numbers for men: 26% of gay men, 37% of bisexual men, and 29% of heterosexual men. Domestic violence affects all of us. Listen on to learn about how it happened, to help yourself and others heal, and to prevent it from continuing to happen. As the book and podcast series progress, there will be a few episodes with more extreme emotional and physical violence. I will make a trigger warning before these chapters. Thank you for being courageous enough to listen, and be sure to give yourself some healing time and space between episodes, especially as we progress in the series. To all of the survivors out there, this is for you. Thank you. In this episode, Jason and I enjoy experiencing the Las Vegas Strip. I experience work stress, and I learn Jason's capabilities for emotionally supporting me. Chapter 6: Exploring. We really enjoyed exploring Las Vegas together. The city was intoxicating. We gambled, danced, and drank the nights away. The electronic slot machines each made their own sounds, announcing themselves at seemingly random intervals, with the top 40 songs from the last 3 decades playing in the background, just barely loud enough to allow my ears to choose to hear Eye of the Tiger instead of Play Texas Tea, test your luck and drill for oil to see how much you can win. Ironically, this was one of my favorite games. I think it seemed the most sinful for someone who cares so much for the environment. The neon lights of the Vegas Strip were brighter than the sky was dark. In the Northwest, we were accustomed to foreboding clouds hanging over our heads and distilling the night's darkness. In the Vegas suburbs, away from the lights, it was so dark I needed to use my phone to see my feet. On the Strip, though, the lights screamed at us with beautiful sex appeal. They shouted, "Come play! Come into the light!" The glorious neon was like the devil in a bad horror film, enticing us to follow the Sin City lights to sin and descend the staircase into hell. We blindly complied, only subconsciously aware that it was the darkness that would later become our shadows. After long nights, gambling and drinking, Jason typically suggested we go to strip clubs. It was his favorite way to sober up before driving home. We lived in the suburbs, half an hour from the Strip. Transit in Vegas left something to be desired. Taxis cost $70 each way, and Uber and Lyft didn't exist yet. So strip clubs felt like an acceptable option rather than driving drunk. Sometimes hotel rooms on the Strip were extremely affordable, so we stayed the night. But to both of us, not drinking just wasn't an option in Vegas. The city was appealing and exciting, but too much to handle sober. The strip clubs were never my first choice, but he loved them, and I didn't mind, so I went along for the ride. To my surprise, they were a lot of fun. The first few times I enjoyed simply observing the women dancing. They seemed to enjoy themselves and displayed more confidence than I could imagine. Sometimes I felt jealous of their beautiful athletic bodies. I also noticed the male patrons. A majority wore ill-fitting business suits, chain-smoked cigars and cigarettes, and smugly ogled the women while they leaned back in their leather armchairs that peeled apart at the seams. Yet, they all seemed to respectfully enjoy themselves and their views. Once I realized both the performers and attendees were content and respectful of one another, I relaxed and enjoyed the scene. I admired the dancers' ability to display athleticism and grace while simultaneously commanding electric control of the room. I spent some nights talking to the dancers, and some nights as a patron getting lap dances. It was a safe place to explore my sexuality and truly indulge in the sins of Vegas. Partying was how we forgot about work for a few hours. Every night it seemed like it was the only time we would ever experience fun in our lives. Our new jobs were infinitely more challenging than our previous positions and therefore caused more stress. We challenged ourselves at work and then again at night to have the most fun possible. Work hard, play hard, and figure out life lessons through trial and error. We also had a lot of fun making and meeting friends. Jason made a friend, John, who grew up in Vegas and had a close group of friends. John introduced us to Mario and Lisa, Chris and Missy, and Robert and Tiffany. We all got along really well and hung out several times a week. We also spent time with other friends who moved to Vegas with us, including Mary, Adria, Joe, and David. Jason loved Travel Co. and was excited to continue work in sales, but the leadership team took several months to set up the Vegas sales department. In the meantime, he worked in customer service, contacting banks to reverse customers' superfluous bank authorizations. He anticipated upselling expensive vacations and instead acted as a sounding board for irritated customers. We were both frustrated with Travel Co., but we signed agreements we would work there at least a year, or else we had to return the money they gave us for moving expenses. We could have left early and paid a pro rate of our contract, but we also felt loyal to a company that paid us to move and have new experiences. The level 3 job I was so excited about turned out to be more difficult than I ever thought. I was told I would have a powerful position that allowed me to help people and use problem-solving skills to find creative solutions. The reality was 80% getting yelled at by angry customers, 15% learning DOS-like line-by-line software programs on the job without formal training, and 5% problem-solving and appeasing the customer. Level 3 meant I was the third person the customer spoke with to solve their problem, so by the time I talked to the customer, they were audibly upset to the point I needed to move my headset a few inches away from my ear. My first week, I had a customer with a canceled flight due to weather. She booked her ticket on 2 different airlines, so I called both airlines to help her find her another flight home. The airline operating the flight offered to rebook her on their next available flight, 5 days later. The airline owning the ticket suggested she pay for a new ticket for $5,000 because the airline rules said at that time that weather was an act of God, and therefore neither airline was responsible for rebooking. I was so frustrated at both of these so-called options. I didn't think either was fair for the traveler. I took pride in myself and my job, and I wanted to give her a better choice. I remained calm on the phone, but I was beyond stressed on the inside. I squeezed the stress ball on my desk with all my might, released it, and squeezed my shoulders to give myself motivation. I asked my supervisor for help, and she suggested a conference call with both airlines. While I was on hold, my shift ended, and so did Jason's. Jason came over to my desk to see if I was ready to walk home across the street together. I explained the situation and asked if he had any ideas. He said nonchalantly, "That sucks. Well, just let the customer know." He cocked his head and angled his body to begin walking away from me. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "That's all you can do." I looked back at him with tears in my eyes, faced my body square to his, and opened my shoulders to emotionally and physically ask for help. In a high-pitched voice, trying not to whine, I said, "I think you're right. I've been trying to help for 4 hours, but it's not fair. She has a job and a cat to get back to. She can't just stay on vacation 5 more days." I put my head in my hands and leaned toward my knees, folding in on myself. "You've been helping her for 4 hours?" he said in disbelief as he took a step away. "Yeah, just call her back and let her know." I raised my eyebrows at him and turned back to the computer, pointing to show I was still on hold with the airlines. He knew I did my best to help her, so he didn't understand why I was still visibly upset. He waited 15 minutes for me and then left. I didn't mind walking home by myself, but I wished he stayed for emotional support. The conference call diminished all hope for a sooner or less expensive flight. I let the customer know, and we both held back tears. She thanked me for trying so hard, but I still felt dejected. Thankfully, this customer didn't yell at me, but I was upset with myself. I was still upset when I arrived home, and Jason still couldn't understand why. I had worked through all my options, but felt there must have been another idea that could have helped. I've never liked accepting subpar solutions, especially when it affects the customer so greatly. Accepting self-defeat and upsetting the customer were even more difficult to deal with when my boyfriend couldn't understand my pain. Although he was great at helping me relax and take my mind off work. His favorite distraction method, if we weren't exploring the strip or hanging out with friends, was to watch movies with associated drinking games based on character verbiage or repeating themes. I preferred to talk out my issues until I felt better, or his understanding made me feel better, but I accepted distraction as a second option. Though, after repeatedly watching the same type of movies with subtle themes such as damsel in distress or stereotypical African American character, I eventually suggested we watch independent movies and make up our own drinking games based on the phrases the characters said. I tried to explain to him the underlying sexism and racism in the Hollywood movies he liked, but he never understood and always told me to lighten up. He frequently told me I didn't have a sense of humor because I didn't find his sexist and racist jokes funny. I eventually convinced him to let us take turns choosing movies, so I chose documentaries and movies featuring strong female leads. We made up drinking games to those as well, and I enjoyed erasing the workday with creativity, humor, and booze. Throughout the next few weeks at work, I got more comfortable with the software programs, and I finally felt I sort of knew what I was doing. The emotional aspect didn't get any easier, though. One day, a customer called because her coupon expired the following day. She said she couldn't use it because she was calling from the hospital where her mother was admitted. I was shocked she bothered to call us in that situation, and I wanted to help her, so I offered to extend her coupon for one more month with the original terms and conditions to uphold the company's policies. She was outraged. "You're only giving me one more month? I'm calling you with my mother on her deathbed and you're only giving me 1 month?" I apologized for her circumstances and offered 2 months instead. She questioned me, and I reiterated myself several times over. I stood strong. I could have given her a coupon which lasted 2 years and waived the original terms and conditions, but I was recently reprimanded for giving too many of those away. The customer hurled back at me. "What is your name?" "Kate," I replied firmly and clearly. "Well, Kate," she yelled into the phone loudly enough for me to hear her voice echo off the hospital walls, "I hope you meet a Kate on the day your mother dies." I was shocked. She didn't even know me. I was trying to help her and maintain my job. She was the one spending her time calling a travel company from the hospital about a damn $200 coupon while her mother was dying. I took a deep breath and replied, "Well, I hope I do. I'm a very nice person." She laughed maniacally and asked to talk to my supervisor. He suggested I extend the coupon for 6 months. Neither of us wanted to deal with someone so angry, so we looked for an easy way out. The extension was a consolation prize for everyone involved. Half sarcastic and half appreciative, she said it was a nice offer but didn't accept it. She guffawed and retorted back, "I said I wanted to talk to your supervisor, not for you to talk to your supervisor and come back with this bullshit. Let me talk to him." I was emotionally exhausted and generally still in shock of how badly the conversation was going. I grabbed my stress ball and lowered my head. I found some inner strength, took a deep breath, and asked if she would hold for him. When their conversation ended, he told me he gave her the 2-year coupon. I felt equally disrespected by the customer and betrayed by my supervisor. I wished he would have had my back and reiterated company policy, but he was more interested in saving himself stress than upholding the rules, an option I did not have. I had only been in this position 2 months, and I still had 10 more months in the contract to work at the company. With that kind of daily emotional stress, I knew I needed to find a job that made me happier, even if it meant paying the early exit contract fees. During the next few weeks, I looked for jobs every night. Jason couldn't understand my level of stress and unhappiness. He was annoyed I spent so much time job searching instead of relaxing with him. His lack of support frustrated me, and I knew I needed to be happier. I continued job searching despite his frustration. I also hoped once I found happiness, then I could inspire him to do the same. He was also miserable at work, but his supervisors consistently told him they would open the